Well, I was born country, but I was raised on rock and roll. Oh, Hank Williams music burning down deep in Jerry Lee's soul. My God, if Hank Williams was alive today, if the sun keep on the rocking and the shaking that way, but I am what I am, mama, not what you want me to be. What you want me to be. Seems like everybody's always picking on old Jerry Lee. Woo! All the boys like to sit around and say, hey boy, you just rocking your life that way. I just am what I am, mama, not what you want me to be.
Jerry Lee has got to be the most courageous performer that I know of.
Jerry stuck right to the heart of the music, the feeling of the music.
You know, when he's on stage, he just rocks. And that's the essence, I think.
Nobody can play boogie-woogie rock and roll piano like Jerry Lee.
You know, folks like to sit around and criticize the things that I do. Wait a minute, honey. Oh, Jerry Lee is a human too. Some folks seem to think I'm strange. One thing for sure, I'll never change. I am what I am, not what you want me to be.
Jerry Lee Lewis is the greatest rock and roller ever. You know, he's Captain Rock and Roll.
I think a lot of us owe a great debt to Jerry Lee for bringing that flamboyant style to the top.
Jerry Lee Lewis is an American original. Totally original.
There was a whole lot of shaking going on, and he caused us.
There's only one Jerry Lee Lewis.
Rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis collapsed last night and was rushed to Methodist Hospital South for emergency surgery. A hospital spokesman says that Lewis is in critical condition with a 2-inch tear in his stomach, but his chance of survival is less than 50-50.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, that's what is real. If you raise the great ball of fire.
Jerry Lee Lewis, original sinner, saint of rock and roll, piano-thumping madman of country music and rhythm and blues. A man who spent a lifetime seeking salvation and acceptance in the eyes of God, while at the same time, tormented by guilt, he pursued earthly pleasures of the flesh.
You're fine, so kind. I want to tell this world that you're mine. Come on, baby, I'm crazy. I got the nickel records to the fire.
In the spring of 1958, Jerry Lee was at the pinnacle of his career, challenging Elvis Presley as the king of rock and roll. But in just a short 2-week period, his career in shreds, his reputation destroyed, he is discarded by the very industry he had helped to build. For Jerry Lee, there was no place to go but back to the beginning. The beginning, Faraday, Louisiana, the tiny southern town 5 miles from the Mississippi River, where on September 29, 1935, Jerry Lee Lewis, feet first and premature, enters the world. He's the product of dirt-poor, God-fearing Southern pioneer stock, whose perceptions of religion and the law will shape much of his outlook on life. The product of a marriage between a convicted moonshiner and an avid pop and country music fan. There had been an older brother as well, Elmo Jr., killed at the age of 8 by a drunk driver. The grief and sense of loss made an indelible impression on Jerry Lee's 3-year-old mind. Sundays would find the entire Lewis clan attending the local gospel church, where the sounds of the rockin' and reelin' piano first touched the soul of a young Jerry Lee. Between the bouts of mischief, like carving initials in the rear pew with cousins Jimmy Swaggart and Mickey Gilly, a musical seed was sown in Jerry that would soon flower into full-blown passion.
Played my first song when I was 8 years old in front of an audience in church. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just forgot the name of the song I was going to sing. And I sat down at the piano and I hit my chords, and I couldn't think of it. I just got up and marched down and asked my mama, what was the name of that song I was supposed to sing? Everybody laughed at me.
But Jerry Lee's father wasn't laughing. He mortgaged the family home and then lost it to buy his son a piano. Soon, it was obvious to all concerned that it was time for Jerry Lee to get some formal lessons at the keyboard.
His parents wanted him to take piano lessons. Of course, Jerry Lee could play pretty well as it was anyway.
And so I went over there and he tried to give me a piano lesson, A, B, C, D, all that stuff.
They had him doing these little scales and things with his fingers a whole bit,
Well, I took his one lesson, so I went back to my second lesson. He said, now, you learn how to play this song by note? Yes, sir. I said, I did. I said, I can read the notes and play it. I said, but don't this song sound a lot better like this here? And he kind of slapped me. And don't ever do that again. I said, don't worry. That boy shocked me to death. I said, man, you don't appreciate good piano playing. So I got up and left.
So much for Jerry Lee's formal piano lessons. His informal education begins at Haney's Big House across the tracks in Faraday's so-called Chocolate Quarter. Jerry Lee and cousin Jimmy are bodily thrown out many times. But from open windows and doorways, Jerry Lee develops a love for the blues, a musical form he combines with his country and gospel roots into a style all his own.
Way down in New Orleans, everything's fine. All of them are catches just a drinking and wine. Drinking that mess, here's the light. They get sloppy drunk and they sing all night.
Playing the piano back of his father's pickup truck, Jerry Lee wins talent contests and fans from county to county.
Well, I've got a nickel, honey, you got a dime. Let's get together and buy some wine. Wine over here, wine over there. We're drinking that mess and everywhere.
At 13, the child prodigy nails down a paying job at a honky-tonk across the Mississippi in Natchez, the notorious Blue Cat Club.
Blue Cat Club. Meanest, lowest down, fighting, killing this place in the world. And the fights break out, they had me a place under the piano. I crawl up under and hide on the piano. Bullets flying, bottles flying, women flying, men flying. After it was all over with, everybody started dancing again.
The teen terror of Faraday spends his spare time skirt chasing and hell raising with his closest friend Cecil J. Harrelson, who first hangs the label killer on Jerry Lee Lewis.
We'd come off the Natchez Bridge, and back then there was no red lights or nothing. And there was a cop over by the name of Booger Red or something. Well, back then, no Chevrolet could catch a Ford. That was an impossibility. So boys cruising on there, when old Ford of mine got to about 95, it leveled off. And Jerry said, he said, Killer, he said, he's gaining on us. And I said, I looked in the rear view mirror, and I said, he is gaining on us, ain't he? I said, well, something wrong, We kept going. He said, he's gaining on us. And so between Faraday and Vidalia, they had a Pat's Drive-In. And Pat's Drive-In had just let out. And I said, my God, I said, look at the traffic. I started to slow down, and Jerry said, he's going to catch us. I said, well, what do you want me to do about it? He said, well, just take them on the right. And we were very lucky. I left the road making about 95 on the right-hand shoulder. It was just a two-lane highway. And I passed a string of traffic all the way, and we got to the colored church, which led up on the levee. I slammed on the brakes, went up on the levee, and we shut the lights off, and we seen him come by.
From hell raising to heaven on earth. In the winter of 1951, Reverend Jewel E. Barton brings his traveling salvation show to town and hires the highly recommended Jerry Lee to play at the services. The good Reverend's daughter, Dorothy, finds herself drawn to Jerry Lee, and before you can say amen, she becomes the first Mrs. Jerry Lee Lewis. In an effort to allay the fears of his outraged father-in-law, the killer announces that he's going to become a preacher and enrolls at the Southwestern Bible Institute in Waxahachie, Texas. Things go well for the freshman preacher until one day his boogie-woogie roots show through, and Jerry Lee lets loose at a student assembly. The students are impressed, the dean is not, and Jerry Lee is sent packing. His marriage to Dorothy ends in separation, and he meets and marries Jane Mitchum without benefit of divorce. No longer a minister, the killer enters the world of sales and commerce.
Well, I work for Atlas Sewing Center out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I was a sewing machine salesman.
Can you imagine Jerry Lee Lewis as a salesman? He couldn't sell anything, but he sold those sewing machines. Jerry goes out, makes the appointment, gets all the sewing machines. He doesn't set up payment plan.
Jerry Lee quickly becomes the hottest salesman in the history of the South. But there's a hitch.
What I'd do is I'd knock on the door and tell them they won the machine, you know. I said, would you sign right here and pay me $10 for excise tax, you know? And they sign it.
He sells them until they're all gone. He gets cash, and that's the end of it.
District attorney wanted to lock me up bad.
With the Atlas Sewing Center, the local law, and outraged housewives on his tail, the killer puts his sales career behind him. The time is ripe for a trip to the country music capital of the world to see if he can give his musical ambitions a boost. Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, the home of the stars and legends of country music. Jerry Lee books himself into a $1 a night hotel and next morning makes the rounds of record companies, music publishers, and anyone else who might give his playing a listen. It's the era of Chet Atkins and guitars. For the brash young piano player from Louisiana, there is very little encouragement.
They all listened to me, auditioned for me, asked me, could I play a guitar? I said, yeah, I can play a guitar. I said, but I play piano. That's my instrument. He said, well, if you can play guitar, we might be able to do something with you. I said, no, thank you. I hitchhike into this town, I hitchhike out.
A year earlier in Memphis, a young Tupelo, Mississippi truck driver by the name of Elvis Presley walked into Sam Phillips' Memphis Recording Services, the home of Sun Records. He wanted to record a song for his mother's birthday, but in fact, he was about to rewrite musical history. In the wake of Elvis's success, Carl Perkins, Roy Orbison, and Johnny Cash are drawn to Sun Records. Jerry Lee wants in on some of that action.
I told my dad, I said, you know, Daddy, I see with this man, Sam Phillips in Memphis, helped Elvis Presley. I read this in the magazine, get started. I said, I think that's what I'm going to go try.
Jerry came in and he was demanding to see Mr. Phillips. And he said he wasn't going to leave town until he got an audition.
My job at that time was to audition people and work with people, make demos and that sort of thing. So the girl up front, Sally Wilburn, came back and said that there's a guy out here says he plays piano like Chet Atkins.
He wasn't going to even listen to me, you know. I said, you're going to listen to me, brother. And he said, Sam's on vacation in Florida. I said, well, you're not. I'm going to play and you're going to record, and he's going to play it for Sam Phillips when he gets in.
I got back in town and he played it for me. I said, where is this damn cat? You know, where is he? He says he's in town. He's over at J.W. Brown's. His cousin, waiting on you to call him. I said, you call him, and let's get rolling.
I hired 4 musicians, and we got in there one day and cut his first record.
It was on a Saturday morning, and we just went through a lot of songs. And during this audition, Crazy Arms came out of that. That was one of the songs that they auditioned, and it only had a drum and piano on it, except maybe right at the very end, so it was a pretty loose thing. And as it turned out, that was Jerry's first release.
See arms that reach to hold somebody new. While yearning heart keeps saying you're not mine, not mine, not mine, not mine. My troubled mind grows blue to another you'll be wed. But now I'm so lonely all the time.
I remember hearing the first Jerry Lee Lewis record the same way I heard the first Elvis Presley record, and that was as a result of Sam Phillips bringing Crazy Arms down to WHBQ for Dewey Phillips to play on his Red Hot and Blue show at night.
It just knocked me out. I said, man, that's my record played on the radio, you know. And Dewey Phillips was playing it, man. And he was talking about me everything. I said, man, we're off to the races now.
Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips runs a Battle of the Records segment on his radio show, pitting one record against another, with the listeners voting for their favorite. Jerry Lee consistently beats Elvis Presley. Jerry Lee had taken a Ray Price country hit and made it his own, a mixture of country and blues. A sound that is beginning to find great acceptance with America's teenagers. Jerry Lee is also in demand at the recording sessions of other Sun artists, including Carl Perkins.
I remember very well first time I seen that little wiry, skinny wild man from Faraday, Louisiana.
It was a Carl Perkins session, and he had invited Johnny Cash to drop by. So Johnny Cash came in, and then coincidentally Elvis dropped by. And Jerry Lee was there, and then that was that legendary $1 Million Quartet.
Same thing every day, getting up, going to school. And we complain, I'm not objecting to it. Oh, I like to hear him sing it. Brown-eyed, handsome man. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna lay down my burdens down by Santa Ana. Oh, what was you playing a while ago, Carl? A? You playing A a while ago? Well, I'm gonna lay down my burdens. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, I'm gonna lay down my burden. Down by the riverside, study, one I ain't gonna study more.
I never forget it that Johnny and Carl and myself and Elvis, you know, every time Johnny and Carl would start to sing something, do something, and Elvis just take over and start singing. Kind of funny.
What Jerry Lee needs now is exposure.
It was Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, and myself. And the first date was in Swift Current, Canada.
I remember it was nothing but gravel roads then up through there, you know, just gravel roads. We was traveling 70 and 80 miles an hour on these gravel roads, rocks flying as high as this building, you know? Day in, day out. It was a great day. 36 days in a row.
In 1956, Jerry Lee has still not established his wild stage act. Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins are about to unleash a monster.
He said, you know, man, y'all got it on me. Y'all standing out there with them guitars. He said, I'm sitting down on that piano. I ain't got the chance to do what y'all do. Y'all move and jump around. He said, I'm glued to that thing.
He said, you know, you need to add a little something to your act to get the crowd going. And he kept saying, something a little bit different. Just something a little bit different. I said, well, what do you want different?
I said, Killer, can you play it standing up? He said, I can play it laying down. I said, well, get up.
When I was up at the piano, things got caught in my boot and kicked it over. And I done it and knocked it away, and the crowd went crazy.
It fell over, and his hair, that long, blonde, wavy hair came down, and he got to going, and they got to screaming.
And then that was all over for anybody else playing the piano, because nobody can do it like Jerry Lee.
I told John, we stand beside the stage, I said, uh-oh. We may have told him the wrong thing.
So after that, man, I tore up in a flock of piano stool, trying to prove a point. And it was all right, but God, it's been costly.
Costly or not, the Killer is ready for a shot at the big time. Sam, Jerry Lee, and Judd Phillips head for New York with a new record under their arms, looking for national television exposure. Their first stop is the Ed Sullivan Show, where the door is slammed emphatically in their faces.
We went on down to Mr. Allen, Steve Allen, and auditioned for him.
At that time, Jerry Lee Lewis was still unknown, I think, to most of America.
Hell, we just told them the truth. This is an exciting act. They said, well, not enough name recognition. No, name recognition, my butt, man.
But I love quality. I don't care whether it's quality in rock or polkas or classical music, country and western. What I love is excellence.
And he said, I want that man on my show Sunday night doing that song right there.
But here he is, jumping and jolting, Jerry Lee Lewis. Come on over, baby. A whole lot of shaking going on. Yeah, come on, baby. Baby, you can't go wrong. Oh, be thinking. A whole lot of shaking going on. Yeah, come on over, baby. We got chicken in the barn. Woo, honey. Come on over. We got food by the horn. Oh, we thinking. A whole lot of shaking going on. Oh, shake, baby, shake. Shake, baby, shake. Shake, honey, shake. Shake, baby, shake. Come on over. Whole lot of shaking going on. Yeah, come on over, baby. We got chicken in the barn. Who's the barn? What's the barn? My barn. Come on, honey. We got a fool by the horn. Oh, we ain't breaking. Whole lot of shaking going on. Easy now, shake. Oh, shake, baby. You can shake one time for me. Oh, I said, come on over, baby. A whole lot of shaking going on. Now let's get real low, shake. All you gotta do, honey, kind of stand in one spot. Jump around just a little bit. That's when you have flat got something, you know. Now let's go. Shake! Shake! Honey, shake! Ooh, shake, baby! Shake, baby! Shake! Big bacon! Whole lot of shake going on! Thank you, sir. Well, that's it for tonight. Yes, sir. And I would like to thank tonight's guest, Shelley Williams. Anthony French, the ultimate.
It was the biggest damn show that Steve had, and one of the biggest he's ever had, and that was on the first show with Jerry Lee Lewis, and it was a killer.
When a whole lot of shaking came on the scene, I remember it. They had to build 2 new pressing plants in Memphis to keep up with the demand.
Record shops were calling, asking how many they could get. Not if he had it, but how many can they buy? Could they get, like, we'll say, use a number, 500. Can they get 1,000? He said, my God, the record just came out yesterday. We don't have that quantity.
Teenagers flocked to the record stores by the thousands to buy Jerry Lee's new single, sending Whole Lotta Shakin' rocketing up the charts and spreading its influence to both sides of the Atlantic.
I was over in England right after that. I was going to school there, and the most popular rock and roll song was A Whole Lot of Shaking Going On. Every guy in Soho was trying to sing like Jerry Lee.
So he really came on like a Tasmanian devil, like a real comet at the beginning. I remember the first instances of learning about him and hearing about him. It was like this wild rock and roll crazy man that no one, he was totally unique.
I also like Jerry Lee Lewis's early band and his guitar player. It did a lot for Burton Cummings and I being in a band and combining guitar and piano, because Fats Domino never had guitar and piano. He always had sax solos. Little Richard always had sax solos. So Jerry Lee had, in the middle of a song, this, rock and roll guitar coming in.
He definitely influenced me, man, and I'm sure a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah, any good British rock and roller was influenced by a genuine originator of rock and roll or rhythm and blues or something from America, like Chuck Berry or Jerry Lee.
With the exposure gained by his appearance on the Steve Allen Show, Jerry Lee finds himself topping the charts in nearly all categories, from country to R&B to pop. It seems there are few borders to his appeal, but the industry wondered what was to come next.
Well, they just wondered if I could follow a whole lot of shaking. Elvis was wondering, he was sweating that one out pretty good, too. He said, I don't think you can follow a whole lot of shaking going on. I don't know, I think I can follow it.
And a fella by the name of Jack Hammer came up the very next day with a song called Great Balls of Fire. I felt the title would fit Jerry Lee, but not the storyline. So I told him I'd like to take the title and write the song. And if we can get him, we'll go down on the song together as writers. And I went home and wrote the song to the Great Balls of Fire.
But the title conjures up visions of hellfire and brimstone for Jerry Lee, leading to a bizarre argument with Sam Phillips.
How can the devil save souls? What are you talking about? Man, I got the devil in me. If I didn't have, I'd be a Christian.
That's another one I taped. It was Sam and Jerry Lee having this big debate about religion and everything.
I don't care. It ain't what you believe. It's what's written in the Bible.
Well, wait a minute.
And it's what's there, Mr. Phillips.
No.
It ain't what you believe. It's just what's there.
Gosh, if it's not what you believe, then how do you interpret the Bible?
H-E-L-L.
Great God Almighty, great balls of fire.
That's right. It says, make merry with the joy of God.
You ready to cut it? You ready to cut it? You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. Boy. Yeah.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
I laughed at love cause I thought it was funny. You came along and moved me, honey. I changed my mind, this love is fine. For goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Kiss me, baby. Feels good. Hold me, baby. Yeah, I want to love you like a lover should. You're fine, so kind. Wanna tell this world that you're mine. I chew my nails, wheel my thumb. I'm real nervous, but it sure is fun. Oh, baby, drive me crazy. Oh, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Love you like a lover should. You're fine, so kind. Wanna tell this world that you're mine. I chew my nails and I twist on my thumb. I'm real nervous, but it sure is fun. Come on, baby, drive me crazy. A goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
Dick Clark called me up. He got me on the phone at the Roosevelt Hotel from Philadelphia, and he said, I have a local show down here called American Bandstand. And I had done the Steve Allen Show 3 times prior to this. And he said, well, I was going to do him a third one then. He said, if you come down and do this show, I may be able to go nationwide with it. I said, well, you know, scratch my back, I might scratch yours.
This is WFIL-TV, the Philadelphia Inquirer station.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, that's what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. I let you love all I thought it was funny. You came along and you moved me, honey. I changed my mind, this love is mine. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Kiss me, baby. Feel good. Hold me, baby. Well, I want to love you like I love a should. You're fine, so kind. I want to tell this world that you're mine. Feel the song. Feel everybody showing fun. Come on, baby. I'm crazy. I got the Mr. Reggae to cut balls of fire.
The night Jerry Lee performed on the Dick Clark Saturday Night Show, I'm sure it was Great Balls of Fire because I remember the pyrotechnics we used. The little bit of ball of fire went off in the middle. He came out in some leopard skin outfit. You can imagine the older generation sitting at home saying, "What is this? This is not Perry Como."
Returning home to Faraday, the conquering hero, Jerry Lee makes sure that every day is Christmas for the Lewis clan.
And I can understand how Jerry felt because we were poor, and then all of a sudden he had thousands of dollars.
Equally impressed or unimpressed with Jerry Lee's newfound success is cousin Jimmy Lee Swaggart, then an itinerant evangelist preacher.
He said, "I'm making $10,000 a day now." He said, "You see that car?" And he pointed to the Cadillac. He said, "I've got he named half a dozen of the big automobiles and sports cars." And he said, "I'm going to be the biggest thing in the world." And I asked him, I said, "Yes, Jerry, but what about your soul? What about your soul?" He never answered me. He dropped his head. His eyes once again filled up with tears, and he got in the car and drove away.
Destination, Memphis, to rejoin his band, which includes his bass-playing first cousin, J.W. Brown. J.W. has a 13-year-old daughter, Myra, and strange as it seems, it's love at first sight for Jerry Lee. Armed with a falsely obtained marriage license and lacking a divorce from his second wife, Jerry Lee marries Myra. He for the third time at 21, she for the first time at 13.
Everyone married young. I think you were old maid when you were 17 if you were a girl. I'm serious. You know, people begin to stare at you. You know, why doesn't that girl have a beau? Where's her husband to be?
That's typical. There were so many. Kids 13 was nothing. 13, 14, they all got married. Look at Loretta Lynn.
New bride or not, New York is no place for a girl as young as Myra. So in December of 1957, Jerry Lee heads alone for the Big Apple to appear in one of Alan Freed's rock and roll extravaganzas at the Paramount Theater. 7 shows a day, 12 days in a row. How does Chuck Berry recall those days?
Sweet little 16.
I don't recall them, but the nights I remember.
Got the grown-up blues.
Kids all over the place. Didn't know who was in what bed.
Tight dresses and lipstick.
A lot of action on it, too.
She's sporting high-heel shoes.
In all different ways, you know.
Oh, mommy, mommy, please may I go.
The Battle of the Egos. Chuck Berry versus Jerry Lee.
Jerry says, "I'm the star of the show. I'm closing the show." And, of course, Chuck Berry with, Sweet Little 16 and Go Johnny Go and all, the whole 9 yards that he had out saying, "No, I'm the star of the show. I'm going to close the show." And they arguing. And this is one point where Jerry said, the story goes that Jerry says, "Okay, Hoss, you can close the show." He said, "I'll go on. You can follow me on." So they said that Jerry walked back and sent one of his guys down to the drugstore, got him a can of lighter fluid, and closed with Great Balls of Fire and sprayed the piano with lighter fluid, set it on fire, and it went up in flames. And he says he walked off, and he walked by Chuck, and he says, "You're on."
Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. I'm just a lonely boy.
But there's no rest for the wicked, and Jerry Lee accepts a package tour of Australia, of all places, with Buddy Holly and the Crickets and a young Paul Anka.
Jerry Lee at the time was married to or was about to marry his cousin.
So coming out of Canada, I figured that sounded pretty exciting. It wasn't the most palatable to a lot of people. So I said, hey, this is a hell of a country.
When I think of Australia, I always think of Jerry Lee's dad. He was always coming around saying, boy, we're sure a long way from Faraday.
All of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, oh boy.
Jerry Lee Lewis and Buddy Holly are studies in contrast. Though both come from humble Southern country roots, Buddy aspires to an all-American image. Jerry Lee, on the other hand, has no such aspiration.
No hesitating, oh boy, when you're with me, oh boy.
You know, Jerry was always game for having fun with everyone, and like between shows where most superstars, you might say, will hole up in their dressing room and not participate with anyone, shoot, Jerry Lee would go sit down at the piano and we'd jam and talk and tell jokes and have all kinds of fun.
We realized then, I as a musician, that there were certain acts that had some staying power or that had a statement, and the only way that they would really not qualify ultimately is if they self-destructed, which was very common then, and of course is very common today, dealing with the success. Well, Jerry Lee had, I think, touched the surface of his potential conflict between his personal life and his creative life. You could sense that.
By 1958, rock and roll is going through many changes. Elvis is inducted into the Army and suddenly transforms from rebel to boy next door. The title King of Rock and Roll is now vacant. Rock music is also coming under increasing scrutiny by the American establishment. A frenzied performance by Jerry Lee in Boston leads to rioting by fans. Alan Freed, as the show's promoter and the man considered the father of rock and roll, is arrested on charges of anarchy and inciting to riot. Soon, city fathers across America are becoming gun-shy to rock and roll's explosiveness.
Any little thing that the people who want to complain could jump on, they would look at it, be very picky about the music we were playing.
We were going up against the odds, boy, because preachers were preaching against you and businessmen thought you were crazy. High schools wouldn't let you play it.
Rock and roll has got to go, and go it does. That's the best way I know to get rid of it.
You could hear that joker breaking that 78 over the turntable, and it kind of would break your heart.
They would try to read things into the music we were playing at that time, but actually they really couldn't, because the music was just fun music.
It was like punk wave and all the other fads that come in. They come and they go. Only rock and roll stayed.
But not without its casualties.
Oh, yeah!
The battle against rock and roll has many fronts. A U.S. government inquiry targets the issue of payola, the acceptance of gifts or money for the radio airplay of records. Alan Freed is singled out as the scapegoat.
It wasn't too cool, as you might say. He just says, yeah, I took money, I have an apartment here, this is the room, and this is the room, and this is whatever. He was saying, who bought all these things?
I refuse to be coerced into signing any statement that I don't wish to sign by anyone.
Freed is finished. He dies 4 years later, rock and roll's first victim. Seeing the way the wind was blowing, Jerry Lee decides that It's a good time to capitalize on his growing popularity in England. With his young wife Myra and sister Frankie Jean in tow, the Killer invades Britain.
I had done an interview on BBC, and in this interview they asked me, because he was coming, and I asked me something about, of course, all I told him was what a fantastic talent he was.
All entertainers in Britain, or would-be entertainers, people that were trying to become successful entertainers, really saw and heard the talent that Jerry Lee had.
Triumphant mayhem reigns at the first 4 concerts, but on the horizon, there's a storm brewing.
Well, at the time I was over there, I really didn't realize the whole extent of his, how the marriage to the little cousin and all that, and really how very young she was.
We were just little girls in England, just with our eyes full of stars.
Jerry Lee was proud. He had him a pretty little wife and everything, and when he flew over there, he had no idea this was going to happen.
The Killer inadvertently admits to Myra's age during a press interview.
When Jerry did that press conference in England, Jerry was sort of a cocky guy. And I think the thing that happened was he kind of turned the British press off. And as I recall, one of the questions was, have you seen Buckingham Palace yet? And Jerry said, Buckingham who? And of course he was putting him on and kidding around like the Beatles put us on when they came over. And they gave us the same type answers.
English people, it's like they say you tell a joke to them and they'll laugh a week later.
And the British press, I think their feathers were ruffled, and they were mad because Jerry was sort of a cocky guy, and they saw a chance to take a shot at him, and they did.
He didn't think he was doing anything wrong, and he wasn't.
You know, that was pretty common practice, especially in small towns or mountainous areas of the South.
He tried to explain that to the press, but they took it the wrong way. They went at him viciously.
And it crushed him. And Myra just cried and cried and cried for days. It really did. It crushed him.
And I looked at him. I said, Jerry, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. These people are meaningless. And he looked around. I said, what would Mother tell you?
And when he realized and got over being so totally destroyed, then he got stubborn, and he got mad, and he said, I'm going to show him.
He just gives them all a piece of his mind, says, the killer's going home. Well, he was on his way home. We all knew that, but he just announced it. The killer's going home. I'll see you cats later.
Jerry, what about this reception in London? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, sir. We had a very good reception, sir.
Oh, is that so?
Yes, we had a very nice time, and the people treated us real nice. And I couldn't have asked for.
Well, the papers reported that you were greeted with silence over there and with catcalls from the audience. Is that right?
Well, I can't agree with them there, sir. Our audience was very nice and very good.
Mm-hmm. Were you there, Mrs. Lewis?
I was there, but I wasn't at the shows.
Oh, you weren't at the shows? Oh, did you notice anything like that sort of reception?
No, it was a very good reception, I thought.
When were you married?
Pardon?
When were you married?
Well, we leave our personal questions out of this, sir.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
I was never asked to leave England. The reason why I left England was on my own. And they sued me, man, for $300,000. I didn't pay no attention to it back then. But when I got ready to go back to England, I had to settle that debt.
The controversy follows Jerry Lee back to America.
Because Jerry Lee was so wild, crazy, and bizarre on stage at the time, I think Jerry Lee was probably the first rock and roller that they went after.
In those days, things were a lot more conservative, so there was a lot of just innuendo and that kind of thing.
Across the country, Jerry Lee's records are dropped from radio playlists by programmers and DJs overly paranoid by rock and roll's now tarnished image. The era of the rebel without a cause is over.
I looked around one day and it was in the chart, it was a Bobby V and a Bobby Denton and a Bobby here and a Bobby there, and then it was Bobby's on the top 5.
As the public outcry against rock and roll continues unabated, the door is open for a new breed of white, squeaky clean, sanitized pop music artists. Within a year, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, the Big Bopper, and Eddie Cochran would be dead. Chuck Berry would begin a 2-year prison sentence. Little Richard would turn his back on rock for religion. and Elvis would stop performing live. Trouble is brewing at Sun Records. Sam Phillips is grasping at straws, trying to revive Jerry Lee's flagging career. He tries everything, including a novelty record that combines Jerry Lee's hits with a comic narration.
Mr. Lewis, I'd like to ask you this question. How do you feel about being back home?
Feels good.
Jerry Lee, where did you meet your charming wife?
Bobbing at the high school hall.
There is even an instrumental version of Glenn Miller's In the Mood, played by Jerry Lee under the pseudonym The Hawk. But there's no hiding the Jerry Lee Lewis touch, and it too is blacklisted.
I remember being a bit upset with Sam Phillips because I thought he probably pushed Jerry Lee's record more than he did mine, and probably didn't, but I thought so at the time.
Sam was just kind of giving a little more attention to Jerry Lee than the others.
Within a one-year period, Roy Orbison, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash leave Sun Records for other labels, while Jerry Lee waits out the term of his 5-year contract.
Jerry Lee was really the last major star that they had at that point, and I think Sam had seen the handwriting on the wall for the independent labels and decided that he wanted to pursue his other interests.
But Jerry Lee's interests for the time being are the honky-tonks, roadhouses, and National Guard armories that he had worked so hard to put behind him. The good old days, which numbered exactly 569, were over. For a washed-up rock and roller, who do you turn to but an old friend? Cecil Harrelson.
We worked what I call 3-2 beer joint, but just small clubs.
Them knockdown, drag-out bars, where you'd play for an hour and fight for an hour.
We had to work every date we could get just to make ends meet. Times were hard, but Jerry never faltered.
That he wasn't discouraged. He went from making like $10,000 a night to $200 a night, and he said, oh, okay, so I'm making $200 a night. And he just kept right on working.
And although he was still Jerry Lee, he still wasn't getting the recognition for the talent that he really possessed.
I remember when he did his show, he went out there and he did his thing, his regular Jerry Lee Lewis thing, and he did a few numbers and he came off and he got a little smattering of applause, and he says, wow, what's the matter with those people? He says, they're really tough. And I says, oh, don't worry about it, and he says, I am worried about it.
The old killer went back in the dressing room. He said, I'll tell you what you do. He said, tell you what you do, Hoss. He said, just get me a 6-pack of cold beer, and I'll take 2 of these little pills right here, and me and this little drummer will go on the stage, and if one person asks for their money back, give them all their money back, and I'll play for nothing. Jerry Lee went on that piano, and man, I'm telling you, for 8 or 9 hours, he never left the stool. He whooped. That piano was worth what it weighed when he got through with it.
But he never would give up. He went in, I remember he cut Sweet Little 16, and he cut What Did I Say? Had a fantastic version of What Did I Say.
The first version of What I Say I ever heard was Jerry Lee Lewis's version. He played it a little different. He played it a little more rock and roll-y than Ray Charles did, and I learned that from the record, played it for some of my buddies at school. Couldn't have been more than about grade 7 or grade 8, and they were totally awestruck that I could do this. They were very impressed, and I had just copied what I'd heard Jerry do on the record.
Yeah, mama, don't treat me wrong. I'm in love with daddy all night long. Hey, hey, all right. Hey, mama, hey, pop, gonna send you back to Arkansas. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Yeah, all right, baby. Oh, see the woman with the diamond ring. She knows how to shake that thing, all right. Hey, hey, hey.
during one of his tours, he gets out of his limousine and goes in this filling station. He sees this great big rack of tapes sitting up in the side of the counter.
And he saw some of his tapes in it. It said Jerry Lee Lewis, but it was on a white label. And it wasn't Mercury or Sun.
He says, well, those tapes are bootleg. The guy says, well, I don't know anything about that. He says, look at that picture. He says, that's black and white, and it don't look good to me. And says, I bet it don't even sound good. The guy says, well, I don't know. Somebody just comes by here and resurfaces them. He says, well, you better tell them they're bootleg. And he says, well, I can't do that. Says, I don't know for sure they are. And Jerry Lee says, I do. So he takes them, the whole rack, and picks it up and carries it outside. And where they're filling his limousine up with gas, he takes the nozzle out of the tank, sprays his tape rack with gasoline, then strikes a match and throws it on there, and the whole thing just goes up in flames. And the guy at the filling station says, well, I'm going to tell that man when he comes back after his tape rack. Jerry Lee says, tell him the killer was here.
Yeah, I remember very well. We were staying in this old hotel, and Jerry was staying 2 or 3 floors above me. And they called and told me and said that Steve Allen had fell in the swimming pool, and they thought he was dead and drowned. And would I go tell Jerry? And I run to the elevator in this old hotel. The elevator wasn't working or something. I run, broke. Of course, I was a young man then. I run upstairs, beat on the door, and got Jerry up. And I said, Jerry, I got some bad news for you. He said, well, what is it? And I said, they think Steve Allen has drowned. He's fell in the swimming pool and think he's drowned him. And so naturally we called home, and they couldn't revive him.
That really brings emotion. I really felt sorry for him. I really did.
And it was a very sad thing. I know Jerry never did really break down until we got to Faraday over here. Because then you can see death is so final then.
For Jerry Lee, this will be the first of many trips to the family plot. A journey that once again forces him to face his own mortality and relationship with God. If the thoughts are sobering, they never seem to have a lasting influence. Within 2 days of his young son's funeral, Jerry Lee is off to England again. It's a long, solemn flight with the grief of his son's death and the memory of his treatment by the British press hanging heavily on his mind. It's a different Jerry Lee Lewis that faces his British fans this time, older, heavier, and in an agonized state of mind.
Burning up like a paper cup. I'm on fire, turning a blow along. I'm a flame from a hole of a charm. Holding a fire blood thing to see what you do to me. Burning up like a paper cup. Woo, I'm on fire.
Despite a massive push by his new Mercury Smash record label, I'm on Fire is the hit that should have been. But America made it clear that it didn't want a middle-aged rock and roll has-been.
start to roast like toast to me.
I'm on Fire is crushed under the weight of the British invasion, led by 4 fresh, witty musicians from Liverpool, England.
We cut all the rockin' stuff we could find, and nothing was working.
Throughout the years, we tried many type of styles with Jerry Lee, as he was certainly capable of singing, you know, rockabilly, pop, country, jazz, whatever he felt like.
We just dropped in, see what condition my condition was in. We did a lot of things that other people would pick up and run with. You know, like Tom Jones ran with the green, green grass at home.
The old hometown looks the same as I step down from that old train. That'll meet me, Lord, was Mama and Papa. Down the road I look, and there run Mary, hair of gold.
Jerry Lee tries everything in all styles of music. But outside of rock and roll, he seems to be a fish out of water. But the hardcore fans stick with him.
I bought a record of his in the Colony Record Shop, which was called Country Songs for City Folks. And that's where I got the Green Green Grass at Home from. I listened to the album, and this song just stuck out. So when I got back to England, I said to my manager, look, I got this Jerry Lee Lewis album, and there's this song on there. So I recorded it, and I called Jerry Lee up to tell him that I was recording it. And then he came over to Britain again, and I had the test pressing of the Green Green Grass at Home, and went to his hotel with it, played it for him, and asked him what he thought of it. And he said, #1 record. That is a #1 record. And he was right.
Down the road I look, and there runs Mary, hair of gold, Lord, and lips like cherries. It's good to touch the green, green grass of home.
Our contract was expiring with Mercury. We had fulfilled our obligation. In other words, we'd cut our quota of songs that we were supposed to cut. And we wasn't going to record anymore for them. We started looking for a new record label. And Eddie Kilroy called.
I said, Jerry, son, I said, I'm with Mercury Records, and boy, we're going to have a good time. He said, well, I'm glad you're at Mercury and you've got a good job, but I'm leaving those people. They can't get a hit record on me, and I'm going somewhere else. I said, no, we got to come in and record one more time and do a country record.
I'd already approached Shelby Singleton about cutting a country hit on Jerry. And Shelby just laughed. He said, oh, man, I don't want these 40 and 50,000 sellers for #1 record. He said, I want 1 million sellers. And I said, Shelby, all I want is the airplay.
Sure enough, he called back a couple of days, and he said, well, I thought about it, and because it's you, I'm going to come up there and do one more record. So we came up with a song from Jerry Chestnut.
And Jerry Chestnut got up, came down to the little old office with his pajamas still on, I believe, and he had his guitar, and it was he sang.
He said, I don't know. Let's do Your Cheating Heart. I said, no, Jerry, let's don't do that. Everybody's done it. He said, well, you know, it's an awful good song. Hank was a good writer, and this one isn't as good as Your Cheating Heart. I said, just go in and cut the song, and it'll be a hit record for you.
One by one, they're turning out the light.
Another Place, Another Time is the song that turns Jerry Lee around in more ways than one. His image goes from hillbilly rebel to dashing, well-dressed country gentleman, ready to take on country and western audiences on their own terms.
Heard you whisper we'd meet again. Another place, another time.
And that thing went straight through the roof. And boy, I felt horrible because, you know, why hadn't we been doing that? Because it had been 4 or 5 years that we couldn't get anything happening with him.
We were proud. I mean, we were tickled to death that he wanted to play our music. I mean, to play what we call country music.
The rock and roll disc jockeys actually didn't like Jerry switching over to country because we liked him to rock and roll, but we understood what Jerry was doing. He had to do it. The country audience accepted him a little quicker than the rock and roll audience on his comeback trail.
he'll get to a certain place in his career where that he'll, so to speak, almost hit the bottom. And all of a sudden, it seems like something snaps in his head, and he says, I think I'll just go back and show him what the killer can do.
Well, it's late, and she's waiting, and I know I should go home, but every time I try to leave, they play another song. Then someone buys another round, and whoever drinks for free, what's made Milwaukee famous has made a fool out of me.
A couple of them got to fighting, and Jerry Lee jumped right in the middle of them, and they started knocking over end tables, breaking lamps and everything. And Linda Gale jumped in there and she says, Jerry Lee, look what you're doing. You're tearing up Lynn's house. You messing up the house. He said, wait a minute. He said, Linda Gale, get a piece of paper and write down everything we break, but right now I'm going to kill these guys.
What's made Milwaukee famous has made a loser out of me. What's made Milwaukee famous has made a loser out of me.
After we started getting hit records, or not necessarily the hit records, but once we'd built up a good circuit, was making good money, that's when Jerry started drinking again. And I don't know what was the pressure getting to him or what. And everything was going together business-wise up, but everything material-wise, like things you'd hold dear to yourself and your loved ones, seemed to be slipping. You know, it's not a very good trade-out.
Sadness and pain. The first thing to go is Jerry Lee's 13-year marriage to Myra. Next, he's staggered by the death of his beloved mother. Then, 2 years later, in 1973, his 19-year-old son, Jerry Lee Jr., dies in a car crash. His fourth wife, Jaren, drowns in a swimming accident. And then his fifth wife, Shawn, dies after a controversial methadone overdose. A decade of heartbreak.
And a lot of people, you know, say maybe that's the reason that he's done this and he's done that. And then some people say, you know, God's punishing him. Because Jerry said if he ever made it back to the top again, he's going to quit and start in the gospel field. And, you know, who am I to really say?
He's had a lot of sorrow. He said himself once that somebody asked him the reason for the liquor, the pills, the problems. He said, well, if you've passed as many caskets as I've passed, you know, you try to do something that'll stem the flow of heartache. I can empathize with that, and I understand.
The 70s reads like a police blotter for Jerry Lee Lewis. He wrecks a Rolls Royce and demolishes a Corvette. He is arrested for driving while intoxicated. Financial problems plague him, and his assets are seized by the IRS. He is charged with numerous weapons violations, including the accidental shooting of his bass player. But the most bizarre incident of all occurs late one rainy night in front of Elvis's Graceland mansion. While the king is in his counting house, the killer gets a royal summons.
Elvis, I kept calling me up and wanted me to come out to his house. He wanted to talk to me about something. He said he was very depressed about something. And I just couldn't picture Elvis Presley being depressed about nothing. So I thought, oh, come on, Elvis, good Lord, you know. And so he caught me down at the Vapors Club, Bad Bob's now. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was already done closed up, you know. And he got me on the phone. He said, I was pretty well loaded at the time, to be honest with you. And he caught me just right. I was okay. I'll be there and get you undepressed in a minute.
That same night, Jerry Lee was given a pistol as a gift and advised to put it on the dashboard of his car so it wouldn't be considered a concealed weapon.
I hit that gate, it just fell off on the floor there or something. I forgot it was even in the car. So here come these cops, you know. I said, Jerry, what is wrong? I said, not a thing. I said, Elvis wanted me to come up here and talk to him. I said, here I am. And they said, well, you're pretty loaded. I said, I'm pretty loaded. You're right there. And they said, what are you doing with that pistol down there? I said, oh, yeah, a pistol. I didn't have too much of an explanation for that. He said, well, did you come up here to shoot Elvis or something? I said, sure. That's exactly what I come up for. If you're that crazy to believe something like that, I said, if you're that stupid, I mean, believe what you want to. Well, they led me downtown.
But the irrational behavior continues. The carousing, the booze, the pills.
His wife called me. I was eating lunch in the restaurant about 11 o'clock. We were to have a 2:30 p.m. service that afternoon. And she said, you've got to do something. He's in serious shape.
I was taking a lot of pills at the time, you know. And nobody had mentioned it to me or said anything about it. And I didn't know that I was in that bad a shape.
The men that were with him said, let him try to play the show. If he doesn't appear, they'll sue him to high heaven. And I said, fine.
Well, I remember I was doing a song called Meat Man.
He couldn't even talk. He was trying to sing. He couldn't say his words. He was slurring them so bad, and it hurt me for him, you know, to continue in that condition.
I thought I was doing great. Apparently I wasn't.
We went on the stage. I took the microphone. He plays, you know, the piano, the mic sticking there. And I took the mic off of the thing. He was right in the middle of his song, as he mentioned. I took it in my hand. His eyes got that big around. He wasn't expecting to see me in a million years. And the music kind of just stopped, you know, kind of just drifted off on its own.
He said, come on, pal, let's go. I said, go where? Jimmy, what are you doing here?
The crowd you could have heard a pin drop in the place, you know. I got up before the stage. I was shaking all over. I'll be honest. I was scared to death. And I told the people who I was, and a lot of them knew me. And I said, Jerry Lee's my cousin, as most of you know. And I've come to get him. I want to take him home with me.
And that rascal, he kept me there for 7 days, man. And I think he saved my life.
But Jimmy can't keep Jerry Lee forever. The killer seems hell-bent for total destruction. He keeps up a relentless performance schedule. A middle-aged crazy, still trying to prove he can cut it. But he isn't 20 anymore, and the effect on his health is devastating.
I was on a Sunday night late. I talked to him briefly Monday afternoon. He was feeling pretty good. And next thing I know, I got a phone call early Tuesday morning that he had been rushed to the hospital.
The killer was rushed here to Methodist South for emergency surgery. He had a 2-inch tear in his stomach.
At times, the doctor would say, you know, it looks pretty bad, you know, but he's got a slim chance.
Somebody told me that he wanted to see me. I couldn't believe it, you know. Geez, we were just going on tour in a day, and I didn't have time, you know, but it was like getting summoned by Hank Williams or Shakespeare or something, you know. So when I got there, God, he looked like he was going to die.
I thought at first I was going to die. The first few moments when I had the problem.
He's such a God-fearing man, you know. I had the feeling that a lot of times he feels like he's working for the wrong side, you know, that he's playing the devil's music, you know, and that he's just the sinner that a lot of people think he is. And I told him I just wanted him to know how much spiritual good he had done, how many people's spirits he had lifted, you know, and how much good he could yet do.
Then I knew I wasn't going to die. It was too easy. I couldn't get out of life that way.
And so, of course, he promised to go straight. And if he was ever well, he said he was going to dedicate his life to doing nothing but good works after that. And as soon as he got healthy, he fell right off the wagon again.
Don't put no headstone on my grave. All my life I've been a slave. I want the whole wide world to know love you so. Mama, 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 don't you cry. Jerry Lee Lewis gonna meet you in the bye-bye. In the sweet bye-bye. You can tell Papa I'm coming home. I'm in home, I'm going to be too long. Mama, don't you cry.
To me, what he stands for most, aside from just his God-given talent, you know, is the fact that he's had the strength to persevere, you know, through things that would have, any one of them would have just blown a normal man away.
Hell, anybody in the world has been dead but Jerry Lee Lewis.
They got to give the guy G for guts, you know. I mean, he bounces back again and again and again.
Hey, man, like he's got it, you know. Ain't no doubt about it, and it shows.
It's like they can't kill him, you know. They can't shut off his music. It's like a songbird or something.
The killer's tough enough that he's lasted over 50 years, and that's a miracle in itself.
Oh, my God, it can't be very long.
In a lot of people's eyes, maybe Jerry Lee Lewis was wrong in a lot of things he did, but this remains to be proven in the eyes of God.
Rocking my life away. Yeah. 1995, 1948, I rode a rock and roll party on my last birthday, but it's good. I'm rocking my life away. Jerry Lee Lewis, I'm there and door here to stay. I got a gal called Nettie, she's chillin' pepper hot. She know how to roll a girl and know how to rock and rock it. Rocking my life away. Pretty good, but it ain't here to stay. Oh, baby, come on, don't you shake that thing out like the way you wiggle your ring on the rock. Rockin' old killer's life away. But I love it, and I thank God I'm here to stay. Yeah!
They seem to remember people most after they're dead. That's why I keep hanging on.